No DNA testing, no fingerprint matching, no surveillance cameras. Yet the police managed to crack a shocking murder case using just reasoning and investigation. So everyone, get ready because this case is truly bizarre and mind-bending. Hopefully it won't give you a headache by the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. I drop new episode every Saturday night, so see you then. On July 26, 1984, in Liaoyuan, Jilin Province, a farmer went to work in his cornfield. As he reached the edge of the field, he noticed something dark on the riverbank nearby. Driven by curiosity, he went over to check it out and was horrified to find the charred body of a woman lying there. Terrified, he rushed to the nearest police station to report it. Upon receiving the news, the police rushed to the scene. The body was found in a cornfield on the south bank of the Weijing River, about 10 meters from the river's edge. But in that short distance, the police discovered two burned areas, one larger and one small. In the larger area, located in the middle of the field, they found several pieces of burned clothing and a single red woman's sandal, matching the size of the victim's foot. About 2 meters away, in the smaller burned area, there were also a few charred pieces of clothing. Additionally, the police noticed a large number of sandal footprints scattered throughout the field leading down to the riverbank, where they found the other sandal. The coroner's preliminary examination revealed that the burned woman was around 30 years old, 1.6 meters tall, and had likely died on the evening of the 25th. The cause of death was burns, with her face being so severely burned that it was unrecognizable. The skin on her neck had peeled off, but her hands showed no signs of burns. Smoke and soot were found in her nose, mouth, and trachea, indicating that she was still alive when the fire started. The body had a strong smell of gasoline. The killer must use it as an accelerant, but the police didn't find any container at the scene. Based on the clues and coroner's report, the investigating officers initially theorized the woman had committed suicide. The scenario they imagined was that the woman brought gasoline to the cornfield by the river late at night, paced around for a while, and after much internal struggle, finally decided to set herself on fire. Judging by the extent of her injuries, the larger burned area was likely the spot where the fire started. Overcome by the intense pain, she instinctively tried to run toward the river, but collapsed after only a few steps, causing the flames on her body to ignite the surrounding vegetation and create a smaller burned area. Tragically, she died by the riverbank due to the severity of her burns. With this conclusion, the police were ready to close the case as a suicide. But just then, a voice in the crowd said, "I disagree." The voice belonged to Officer Sun, who had been sitting in on the discussion by chance while waiting to report to the chief. Officer Sun wasn't convinced that the woman had committed suicide. First, self-immolation is an extremely painful way to die, and it's unlikely a mentally normal person would choose this method. Second, creating such extensive burn areas and damage would require a large amount of gasoline, yet the police hadn't found any gasoline containers, even a debris at the scene, which means it had been taken away by the killer. Therefore, Officer Sun suspected there was more to this case than met the eye. The chief found Officer Sun's reasoning persuasive, then handed the case over to him for further investigation. At that time, no one knew there was a huge conspiracy behind this case, and it was so complicated that even Officer Sun began to doubt himself and almost gave up. In the following days, the police began visiting every village near the crime scene, but they found no information about the victim. However, they did discover something. About 50 meters from the original burn site, in a sweet potato field, they found trampled ground and a relatively new woman's stocking amidst the mess. At that time, stockings were not cheap, only affordable to middle or upper class families, and no one would just throw away a new one. So there was only one possibility. This stocking was the victim's. A few days later, a young man, looking quite anxious, came to the police station. He reported that his sister had gone missing on the evening of July 25th after leaving home to visit a nearby clinic. This immediately caught Officer Sun's attention. After questioning, he found that the missing woman's age, appearance, and the time he went missing all matched the details of the victim found by the river. Officer Sun showed the man some photos of the evidence, and he instantly recognized the red sandals and stocking as belonging to his sister. The charred clothing fragments were also identified as what she was wearing when she left home that day. Finally, the police confirmed the identity of the burned woman, Zhao Xiaolian, 35 years old, an employee at a local textile factory. Her husband, Li Xiangdong, worked at a supply and marketing cooperative. They had a 7-year-old daughter and was a harmonious family. Soon, Officer Sun immediately began investigating Zhao's personal relationships. There's an old saying, when someone is murdered, the first suspect is their partner. The police then focused their investigation on Li. Strangely, despite his wife being missing for days, Li hadn't reported it to the police. This raised red flags. As the investigation deepened, the police found Li was currently on a business trip out of town and had frequently traveled to Changchun City for work in recent months. At the same time, Zhao's brother mentioned that before his sister disappeared, she had complained about Li's behavior and even started suspecting he cheated on her. With these clues, Officer Sun visited Li's workplace. However, he found that the cooperative had no business dealings with any units in Changchun City, and they had never assigned Li on any business trips. In fact, his co-workers were puzzled by his recent unexplained absence from work. What's more, one of the colleagues also mentioned seeing a man resembling Li in Liaoning province acting intimately with a young woman. The police even found a photo of a woman in Li's drawer, his ex-girlfriend, who had married someone else in Liaoning 12 years ago. So, could Li's suspicious behavior be because he had rekindled an old flame? Officer Sun immediately went to Liaoning to investigate. But after verifying the information, it turned out that Li hadn't contacted his ex-girlfriend since their breakup, and his co-workers couldn't be sure the man he saw was Li. With no other leads, Officer Sun had to abandon this line of inquiry. At this point, all the leads dried up. Li had vanished without a trace, and his whereabouts were unknown. As days passed, Officer Sun began increasingly stressed and even began to doubt whether he had overcomplicated the case. At the time, China was cracking down on crime to improve public safety, so the police were severely understaffed. Seeing that the case was going nowhere, the chief assigned Officer Sun to investigate another case. Unexpectedly, this move led to a breakthrough in the investigation. Officer Sun was first assigned to investigate a theft at a construction company. According to the company's manager, 2 masked men knocked out the security guard late at night and broke into the finance office. Strangely enough, they didn't steal any valuables. Instead, they burned a bunch of receipts that were locked in a cabinet. This made people wonder what kind of evidence might those receipts have been hiding. Digging deeper, Officer Sun discovered that on March 8th of that year, the company had reported the mysterious disappearance of 8 tons of steel, valued at over 10,000 yuan. In that era, 10,000 yuan was a huge sum of money, equivalent to about 2.5 million today. So this case caused a huge stir throughout Liaoyuan, and the higher authority even sent a special team to investigate. But just as they were about to audit the company's accounts, the receipts in the finance office were burned by the thieves. The timing was so perfect. Those receipts were definitely suspicious. To make matters worse, the criminals were unusually brazen. Several investigators' families were stalked and harassed, clearly a warning to the police not to dig too deep. The police tried to catch them, but all failed. These guys were both cocky and cunning, but this also revealed something important. The culprits were likely insiders from the company. While Officer Sun was interviewing the company employee, another report came in. Someone claimed to have seen 4 masked men driving a tractor, dumping a body in a remote area, and then setting it on fire with gasoline. The body was roughly a 30-year-old man, about 1.75 meters tall. Hearing this description, Officer Sun's instincts kicked in. The victim's description was eerily similar to Li. Even the location was just 15 kilometers from the first burning incident. Could it be that someone else was behind the killings and had used the same method to murder Li as well? The police quickly arrived at the scene and found 2 crucial clues. One was the victim's skull, but with the forensic technology at the time, DNA couldn't be extracted to identify the deceased. The other was a clear set of tire tracks, likely from a nearby coal mine's tractor. Following this lead, the police discovered that the burned body belonged to a local miner who had died in an accident. Local traditions held that those who died unexpectedly had to be cremated for their souls to rest in peace. So the miner's co-workers had taken him to the mountaintop for a makeshift funeral, leading to the misunderstanding. Though this case had no direct link to Zhao, it sparkled a new idea for Officer Sun. Normally, when a body is burned, there are specific areas that are more damaged than others. But as mentioned before, Zhao's face was severely burned. What if the killer burned her face deliberately to conceal her identity? Even though the police had already identified the victim, they hadn't made this information public out of caution, and they instructed Zhao's family to keep it quiet. Since that's the case, why not continue pretending they don't know who the victim is and stage a trap to lure the killer out? The police had Zhao's brother spread the word that he had been asked by the authorities to identify the burned body to see if it was his sister. Just 3 days after, Zhao's sister found a letter on her windowsill. The letter was supposedly from Li Xiangdong and said something like he and his wife were in Guangdong province demanding payment from the construction company. After dawn, they would return. If anyone asks about their situation, don't say anything, and make sure to burn this letter after reading it. At first glance, nothing seemed off about the letter, but there were plenty of inconsistencies. First, after comparing it, the police realized it wasn't Li's handwriting at all. Second, the writer claimed that Zhao was with his husband in Guangzhou, even though she was already dead. This means the writer knew what had happened and was trying to create the illusion that Zhao was still alive, then to stop her family from going to identify her body. Third, the letter was left on Zhao Xiaolian's sister's windowsill, even though it was her brother who had spread the news, suggesting the messenger was familiar with the family situation, likely someone they knew. Lastly, to everyone's surprise, the construction company mentioned in the letter was the same one who lost the 8-ton steel not too long ago. With this in mind, Officer Sun turned his attention back to that theft case, and it was discovered that while there was no official business connection between that construction company and Li's supply agency, Li was the one who picked up the missing 8 tons of steel. When the investigation team found this, they rushed to question him, only to find out he was away on a business trip, and his wife, Zhao, told them it was Director Zhang who orchestrated everything, and her husband was just a runner who didn't know anything. Director Zhang was the sales director at the construction company, a sly and smooth-talking man who was well-versed in the sales operations. For someone like him, stealing 8 tons of steel wasn't a challenge. But when the investigation team questioned him about the theft, he denied any involvement. Then, when they asked for the relevant receipts, the finance office was broken into and the receipts were burned. As Officer Sun was leaving the construction company, the security guard stopped him and mentioned that a few days ago, he had received a letter addressed to Li from a labor company in Changchun. The letter stated that Li sold the 8 tons of steel to the company for 50,000 yuan, but didn't provide an invoice. It also mentioned that he will buy more steel in the future and hoped that Director Zhang could help by offering a discount. At this point, all signs pointed to Director Zhang. The police theorized that Zhang might have stolen and sold the steel and, fearing he'd be exposed, decided to kill Li, then impersonated him to write a letter to his family. But the handwriting wasn't Zhang's either, so he might have gotten someone else to write it. Officer Sun then quietly investigated Director Zhang's connections and collected handwriting samples from his friends and relatives, but none of them matched the letter. Just as the case seemed to hit another dead end, a little girl helped bringing the real culprit to light. There was, in fact, someone who had witnessed the whole thing, Zhao's 7-year-old daughter. The trauma of her mother's brutal death had left her deeply shocked, and she was initially unwilling to talk to anyone. But now, having started to recover, she was ready to help identify the culprit. The next day, the police brought a stack of photos for the little girl to go through. Sure enough, she picked out the man who had delivered the message to her mother. But it wasn't Director Zhang. It was a man named Hao Liqiang. Who was this guy? Investigations revealed that Hao Liqiang also worked at the same company as Director Zhang, managing the warehouse. He was the one who handed over the steel to Li. But the handwriting on the letter wasn't his either. It belonged to his friend, Kong Dongming. The police immediately brought Kong in for questioning. Kong admitted to writing the letter, but claimed he was just helping out his friend Hao, who had asked him to copy down the message to Li's family about the business trip. He knew nothing about what was really going on. The police then arrested Hao Liqiang, and during the interrogation, he confessed everything. It was all Director Zhang's idea. Zhang gave Li the pickup slip, then told Hao just handed over the steel, not to ask questions. Later, when the police started investigating, Zhang was worried that Li's wife, Zhao, might spill the beans. So on the night of July 25th, he tricked her into coming to the riverside and burned her alive. Before burning her, Zhang assaulted her, then strangled her unconscious and tied her hands with wire. At that moment, he suddenly yelled at Hao to leave. Hao was scared out of mind and ran. Not long after, he heard a scream. Looking back, the flames were even higher than the corn stalks. Later, Zhang got worried that Zhao's family might identify her body, so he ordered Hao to write the letter. But Hao was afraid the police might trace it back to him, so he got Kong to copy it. Then he delivered it to Zhao's sister's house. Based on Hao Liqiang's testimony, the police instantly arrested Director Zhang. After months of hard work, the case was finally cracked. But Officer Sun couldn't feel happy about it because something about Hao's confession didn't seem right. Officer Sun found Hao Liqiang's confession suspicious. He claimed he had fled the scene out of fear, yet he described the scene in great detail, including some specifics that the police had never disclosed. This indicated that he had actually witnessed the entire event. He also mentioned that Director Zhang had tied Zhao's wrists, but the coroner hadn't found any ligature marks on her body, meaning Hao hadn't told the truth. Meanwhile, Director Zhang, after being arrested, persistently proclaimed his innocence, insisting he had done nothing and knew nothing. Reflecting on this, Officer Sun began to suspect there might be more to the case. The police decided to reinterrogate Hao Liqiang, and after a tense battle of wits, he finally revealed the truth. It turned out that the theft of the 8 tons of steel had been meticulously planned by Hao himself, with Li and Kong also involved. They used a forged pickup slip to transport the steel from the construction company and then sold it to the company in Changchun City. Later, when the buyer demanded an official invoice, they sent a beer invoice instead. Fearing exposure, Hao then had Li write a letter to the buyer, claiming that they could get as much steel as they wanted in the future, pinning the blame on Director Zhang. Hao believed his scheme was foolproof, but it wasn't long before the police came knocking. Given the number of people involved, Hao feared being discovered, so he decided to eliminate Li first. On July 21st, Hao lured Li to a coal mine under the pretense of drinking together. When Li wasn't paying attention, Hao pulled out a hammer and struck him, then threw him into an abandoned coal pit. Just as Hao was about to leave, he heard a faint groan from the pit. Realizing Li was still alive, he returned, lifted a large stone, and dropped it to the pit, after which everything went silent. Hao then went to find Zhao Xiaolian, telling her that the steel theft had been uncovered and that her husband had fled to Changchun to lay low. He warned her if the authorities came asking, he should blame everything on Director Zhang, or else her husband wouldn't escape punishment. But Hao Liqiang, naturally suspicious, couldn't let down his guard. The more he thought about it, the more he feared that Zhao would eventually reveal the truth. So he resolved to kill her as well. On July 25th, Hao tricked Zhao by telling her that her husband had secretly returned and that he was going to take her to meet him. Unsuspecting, Zhao followed Hao to the riverbank. Once they entered the cornfield, Hao revealed his true intentions. Despite her desperate pleas for mercy, Hao dragged her into a nearby sweet potato field, during which she dropped a sock. After assaulting her, he dragged her a bit further into the cornfield and strangled her. Soon, Zhao stopped moving. Hao then poured the gasoline on her body, set her on fire, and fled the scene. However, as he was leaving, he heard a scream. Zhao had only been unconscious and was still alive, but seeing the blazing flames light up the sky, he didn't dare return to finish the job, so he fled with a gasoline can. After dealing with the couple, Hao decided to destroy the forged documents. He and Kong knocked out the construction company's security guard, broke into the finance office, and burned the relevant documents. At this point, Hao believed everything was over, but then he heard that Zhao's brother was going to the police to identify the body. Left with no choice, he risked having Kong copy a letter and place it at Zhao's sister's house, trying to create the illusion that Zhao and Li were still alive. But this move gave the police the breakthrough they needed to unravel this complex and bizarre case. When the case was finally solved, Officer Sun said that the weight on his mind had finally lifted, and he felt relieved that he had fulfilled the promise he made at the beginning. Later, during an interview reflecting on his experience handling the case, he couldn't hold back his tears and said,
"After we cracked the case, I feel like all the pressure I've been carrying just lifted off me.
I was in tears at that moment. When I looked at all the evidence we'd gathered from our hard work, I feel like, as a police officer, I did what I was supposed to do. I gave everything I had to give. What really struck me about this case is that there were 2 times when it almost got closed. But thanks to Officer Sun's attention to detail and persistence, the truth finally came out. No innocent person was wrongfully accused, no guilty person was let go, and the souls of the deceased could finally rest in peace. I always believe when it comes to justice, we really need this kind of dedication to maintain public trust in the legal system and keep our hopes for justice alive. What do you think? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Next Saturday, we will dive into another spooky story, so don't miss it.